Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. Here are the actually four big stories for today. So, Russia spends about 25% of the state budget on militarization. And I read this and I thought, I wonder how far they can actually push that before it breaks. Putin continues to believe that there is a threat to Russia from NATO, even though NATO is a defensive alliance and the threat is actually coming from Russia to Ukraine, not NATO to Ukraine, and it is willing to spend an increasing amount of its budget on armaments. U.S. Director of National Intelligence Arvil Haines said in a congressional hearing the other day. Putin has increased defense spending to nearly 7% of GDP, almost double the historical average. Russia's defense budget is now accounts for about 25% of all spending. So how far can that go? That's the first question. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, let's look at how much of its budget did the Soviet Union spend on it, and during its peak, 1984 to 1985, was about 38% of the total. And if you remember, the Soviet Union collapsed because it couldn't kind of hold it together, not just because of defense spending, but because trying to sustain the periphery of the Soviet Union was very difficult for it. But I don't know that there's a lot of room to go. So I hear people say, well, the Russians are already on a war footing. Okay, well, how far can they go? I don't think it's much further. Okay, big story number two. So this morning I looked at 1260 as the raw number of those that were off the battlefield today, and it's been like that for about a week now, where it's been north of 1,000. What I didn't look at really was this 473,400, which is pretty high. Now, I'm assuming that, let's say that the Ukrainians know what the numbers are and it's 473. Let's look at this. Intelligence update from Britain. The average daily number of Russian casualties killed and wounded in Ukraine throughout April 2024 remained at the pattern of 2024 with 899 losses per day in April. So if 899 is April and we've been at over 1,000 for the last week, it has ticked up significantly. Now, but it goes on. It is likely that Russian casualty rate will again increase over the next 2 months as they renew a dedicated offensive operations in eastern Ukraine. They might actually gain some ground, but they're going to take tremendous casualties in the process, especially once the weapons get to the Ukrainian front line. This follows a slight decrease in the pace of operations over the past 2 months since the fall of Avdiivka. Now, this is what I was getting at. The total number of Russian losses since the start of the conflict now stands at over 465,000. Full stop. That's what I wanted to compare. 465 is the British estimate to 473, which is the Ukrainian estimate. And we're going to keep going, and then I'll come back to something else related to this. 465,000. It's likely that despite the extreme cost in life, Russia has fully adapted its military to attritional warfare, which relies on mass over quality. So just keep throwing them at them. I was watching on Twitter yesterday a Russian commander giving a pep talk. Yes, you're going to die, but they'll put your name on a plaque on your grave and we'll light a torch to you. Or that's probably not the best pep talk. This reliance on mass will almost certainly continue for the duration of the Ukraine war and have long-lasting effects on Russia's future army. So they're just whittling themselves down in the process. But what I want to focus here on is 465 as opposed to 473 as opposed to, well, here, Russian losses in Ukraine reach 500,000, says France. So you have 473, 465, 500,000 according to France. It's up there somewhere. It's not like Russia would tell you that's maybe there's a little less than 100,000 or some kind of crazy talk, but it's pretty significant. According to the Ukrainian military estimates, Russia has lost over 470,000 personnel over the 2 years since the full-scale invasion, but France says it's about 500,000. Okay. That was big story number two. Big story number three. So Bill Kristol highlighted Fred Kagan. Bill Kristol is a fairly significant conservative figure, a never Trumper. We've been a day late and weapon systems short this entire war. That has shaped the course of the conflict in a significant way. Just not getting the Ukrainians the things that they need in order to bring the fight to the Russians has really shaped what has happened over the last 2 years. The administration has to get over its hesitations about providing Ukraine with the weapons of war that it needs. That's very true. Gary Kasparov commented on Bill Kristol's comment here. I know it's just an expression, but a decade late would be accurate, and that's fair as well. I mean, put in the broader perspective, and I think that's right. Instead of always waiting for the Russian cancer to spread, it must be fought back with the strongest medicine early. Like, what would have happened if this had been dealt with in 2014? If there was the political will in 2014 to actually address this so that it didn't take root, it didn't fester, it didn't just try to take Crimea and Donbass and hold on to that for as long as they have. But of course, we can't. I mean, it's counterfactual. So what has this done? It's shaped the course of the conflict in a significant way. And here's where we are now. I'm going to show you about a minute or two of Greg Terry talking yesterday. Here's where we are because, let's look at the day late and dollar short with it getting the $60 million in aid, or $60 billion in aid from the U.S. It's taken 6 months. Here's what the front line looks like. Here's Greg Terry talking about it last night.
Than even last night. Let me go to blue for this. If you're here on Professor Gerdes' channel or my channel and you have not registered for the free flag giveaway, please make sure to click the link that is pinned one time. Put your name in.
That was last night. That's no longer.
So I want you guys to see how close. This is Dnipro, the city, 1 million people. And this is the main highway coming in from Pavlograd, which is a large city, over 100,000. You continue down this main highway. I've ridden that road 100 times. Beautiful highway. Pokrovsk. From Pokrovsk, you would split and you go right into Donetsk, or you go directly to Konstantinivka and on to Bakhmut, which would be Chasiv Yar. You turn left and go to Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, and then you go north to Kharkiv. You see where the focal point is? Right there.
Okay, now this is new as of the last month or so. This was, the old line is in pink and the new line is in orange here. This salient is pretty new. And they keep pushing forward and pushing forward and pushing forward, trying to take that road.
Now, that blue road, in fact, I'll now change the color so there's no question. This road right there is the most important stretch of highway for supporting Chasiv Yar and this circle here, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinivka. This is a real issue right there. Now I'm going to clear all that out, and I'm going to remove that, and then I'm going to zoom in now close. Right here. Okay? Today, Russia even took more. We'll just go the red line, not the gray, to the interchange. 10.05 kilometers. 6 miles. This is the road that Ukraine must hold on to, and Russia has pushed that far. All that's left, guys, is just a couple of little villages. This Nova Alexandrivka, Podvuchkinka, and then you're on the highway. So we will keep our eyes on that. It's vitally important.
And that's what Russia's trying to push through. And they have either the 7th, which is Putin being reelected, the 9th, which is the Victory Day parade from World War II, or maybe when Putin meets with Xi, but somehow soon they want to have that as a victory. But we're a day late and a dollar short with giving them the weaponry in order to supply them, and this is what has happened as a result. Okay, I've talked about, this is the next big story. I've talked about this again and again. There have been all kinds of corruption scandals. I talked about 2 this week. One was the former cyber head who's now off to the front line. Then I talked about a second one, and then I also talked about another one on the Russian side with Russian corruption scandal, which could nab additional senior Kremlin officials. This guy, he was on the take, but everybody knew it, and so were other senior officers. A third one in Ukraine this week. Ukraine says it's close to 500,000 in reconstruction funds for Burdenka disappeared. But again, you compare that to what's going on in Russia. Corruption is constant in the area, but at least in Ukraine, they're exposing it, trying to deal with it, trying to root it out. Over here, I think this is just because he's made a political enemy somewhere, and so they were cool with it until they weren't cool with it, and it's going to topple a bunch of people. Okay, last big story. This was really interesting to my mind. Ukrainian army purportedly burns Trump in effigy. Now, we addressed Donald Trump. Because of you, President Zelensky couldn't get any weapons. You'll never be president again. You're a traitor. You will pay with your blood for what you did. And they're saying that here, dressed up in Ukrainian uniforms that aren't exactly Ukrainian uniforms, but here you see him talking about it, and I'm going to stop it before they burn.
Через тебе, паскуда, президенту Зеленському не відправляли зброю. Тобі більше не бути президентом. Ти зрадник і заплатиш кров'ю за те, що...
You'll pay for what you did, and then you see them actually burn the thing in effigy. Okay, well, how can you be this bad at propaganda and actually keep your job? In one of Russia's laziest disinformation productions of the year, Russians constructed some Ukrainian soldiers from guys that obviously never spoke Ukrainian, put them in incorrect uniforms to then burn an effigy of U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump. Now, it's not just that they did it poorly, but why would Russia want to have fake Ukrainians, burning an effigy Trump in order to send this message so it spreads on social media, right? Like, that's what you have to ask yourself. Russian attempts to sow divisions between Ukraine and its allies is a core goal of the Kremlin propaganda machine, and it isn't stopping anytime soon. Okay, last little bit. This morning, I said thank you to Patreon members, and you can join my Patreon for free. I would urge you to do so that we have a backup. I said thank you to my undergrads, thank you to my graduate students, to my colleagues, as well as board members. And then I screwed up one name of the board member. I said Murray James, Indie Poker Dude, John McElrevy. As I said it wrong. I mispronounced it. I'm an equal opportunity mispronouncer. I mispronounce things in multiple languages. But I do want to say thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you to them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.